They say desperation makes you do crazy things. I never believed that until the day a stranger called and offered me a deal I couldn't refuse. Marry her, live in her mansion, help raise her nephew. In return, she'd save my mother's life. Simple, right? Just a contract. Just business. Just 1 year of pretending to be in love with a woman I'd never met. Candace Garfield was everything. I wasn't powerful, wealthy, untouchable. A CEO who commanded boardrooms and built empires. And me? I was just a broke college graduate watching my mother die because I couldn't afford to save her. The contract was clear. Separate bedrooms, no emotional attachment, purely professional. But contracts don't account for the way someone's smile can make your heart race. They don't warn you about falling asleep to the sound of a child's laughter. They don't prepare you for the moment when pretending stops feeling like pretending. They definitely don't tell you what happens when paper hearts start beating. My name is Jade Campbell, and this is the story of how I agreed to fake a marriage and accidentally found real love. Now, let me tell you how it all began. The rain fell like tears from heaven that afternoon, each drop a reminder of how empty my pockets were, how desperate my situation had become. I stood at the bus stop, umbrella barely holding against the wind, watching the world move forward while I felt stuck in place. My phone buzzed in my pocket, probably another rejection email. I'd lost count of how many companies had said no to me since graduation 3 months ago. But rejection emails weren't my biggest fear anymore. It was the hospital bills stacking up on my kitchen table. It was my mother's cough getting worse every night. It was the look in her eyes when she told me not to worry, even though we both knew we should be terrified. My name is Jade Campbell, and I never thought my life would come to this 23 years old, a college degree I couldn't use, and a mother I couldn't save. The bus arrived late, as usual. I climbed aboard, finding a seat near the back where I could hide my tears if they decided to come. They often did these days. That's when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Scam calls had become as regular as my morning coffee, but something made me press the green button. Hello? My voice sounded tired even to my own ears. Is this Jade Campbell? The voice on the other end was smooth, confident, powerful. A woman's voice that seemed to command attention even through a phone line. Yes, speaking, I said cautiously. My name is Candace Garfield. She paused, as if expecting me to recognize the name. I didn't. We need to talk. It's about a business proposal, one that could change your life. I frowned, looking out at the rain-soaked streets. I'm sorry. I think you have the wrong person. I'm not in business. I know exactly who you are, Jade. Her tone softened slightly. I know about your mother. I know you've been looking for work. And I know you're running out of time. My blood ran cold. How do you know that? Who are you? Someone who needs your help as much as you need mine, she said. Meet me tomorrow at Garfield Enterprises, 10 a.m. sharp. I promise you, this conversation will be worth your time. But I don't understand. You will, she interrupted gently. Just come, please. The line went dead. I sat there, phone pressed against my ear, my heart racing. Who was this woman? How did she know about my mother? And why did her voice make me feel both terrified and strangely hopeful? That night, I couldn't sleep. I researched Candace Garfield on my phone, and what I found made my breath catch. She was everywhere: Forbes, Business Weekly, Society pages. CEO of Garfield Enterprises at just 30 years old. Beautiful, powerful, untouchable. Her company was worth billions. So why did she want to meet with me? The next morning, I stood before the glass tower of Garfield Enterprises, feeling impossibly small. The building reached into the clouds, all steel and mirrors and money. I didn't belong here, but I thought of my mother, and I walked through those doors anyway. The elevator took me to the top floor, where a professional woman in a designer suit greeted me and led me down a long hallway. When she opened the final door, my breath caught. Candace Garfield stood behind a massive desk, and she was more beautiful than any photograph could capture. She wore a perfectly tailored black suit that hugged her tall, elegant frame. Her dark brown hair was pulled back, showing off sharp cheekbones and a jawline that could cut glass. But it was her eyes that held me gray, piercing, intelligent, and studying me with an intensity that made me feel exposed. "Miss Campbell," she said, and even my name sounded different in her mouth. "Thank you for coming." "Good morning, Miss Garfield," I managed. "Candace," she corrected, moving around her desk with effortless grace. "Please, sit." I sat, trying not to fidget as she watched me. The silence stretched between us until finally, she spoke. "I'm going to be direct with you, Jade. May I call you Jade?" I nodded. "I have a nephew. His name is Matthew. He's 4 years old." Her voice softened when she said his name. "My brother and his wife died in a car accident 6 months ago. Matthew is all I have left of my family." "I'm so sorry," I said quietly. "And I meant it." She nodded. "I want to become his legal guardian. I want to give him a home, a family, stability. But the courts have concerns about my lifestyle. I work constantly. I'm single. And she paused. "I'm a woman who prefers the company of other women. The family court judge has made it clear that my chances of gaining full custody are slim unless I can demonstrate a more traditional family structure." My heart started to race. I was beginning to understand. "I need a spouse," Candace said bluntly. "Someone who can help me care for Matthew. Someone the courts will approve of. Someone I can trust." She leaned forward, her eyes locked on mine. "I need you, Jade." The words hung in the air between us. "You want me to?" I couldn't finish the sentence. "Marry me," she said simply. "A legal marriage. A contract for 1 year. You would live in my home, help care for Matthew, and appear with me at necessary public events. In return, I will pay for all of your mother's medical expenses, treatment, medication, the best doctor's money can buy. I'll also provide you with a monthly salary." I stared at her, my mind reeling. This couldn't be real. "Why me?" I whispered. She pulled out a folder. Inside was information about me, school records, job applications, recommendation letters. "You graduated with honors. Your professors say you're hardworking, compassionate, and responsible. You've been caring for your mother alone for 2 years. You've sacrificed your own dreams to take care of her." She looked up. "You're exactly the kind of person Matthew needs, exactly the kind of person I need." "This is crazy," I said, but my voice lacked conviction, because I was already thinking about it, already imagining my mother finally getting the treatment she needed. "I know it's unconventional," Candace said, "but I'm offering you a solution to both our problems. Matthew needs a stable home. Your mother needs medical care. We can help each other. And what about us? The marriage? It would be professional," she said, though I noticed tension in her shoulders. "Separate bedrooms. No expectations beyond what's necessary for appearances. We'd be partners in caring for Matthew, nothing more." Nothing more. The words should have been reassuring, but instead they made something in my chest twist. "I need to think about it," I said. "Of course." She stood, and I quickly rose to my feet. She was taller than me by several inches. "Take the day." "But Jade?" Her voice dropped lower. "Matthew's custody hearing is in 3 weeks. I need an answer by tomorrow." She extended her hand. I took it, and the moment our palms touched, I felt a jolt of electricity. Her hand was warm, her grip firm and confident. She held my gaze, and for just a second, I saw something flicker in those gray eyes. Vulnerability, maybe, or hope. "Thank you for considering it," she said softly. That evening, I sat beside my mother's bed, watching her sleep. She looked so small, so fragile. I thought about Candace Garfield and her impossible offer. Could I really marry a stranger? Could I pretend to be in love for the sake of a child and my mother's health? But then I thought about Candace's eyes when she talked about Matthew. The softness in her voice, the pain barely hidden beneath her professional mask. I pulled out my phone and typed a message. This is Jade Campbell. I have my answer. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. And? I took a deep breath and typed 2 words. I'm in. The response came within seconds. Come to my office tomorrow at 9 a.m. Bring your mother's medical records. We have a lot to arrange. Thank you, Jade. You won't regret this. I looked at my sleeping mother, then out the window at the city lights. I hoped Candace was right. Everything moved impossibly fast after that. Lawyers, documents, medical consultations, Candace's people handled it all. By the next afternoon, my mother was being transferred to a private hospital with doctors I'd only read about in magazines. Jade, sweetheart, she whispered, holding my hand. How did you manage this? I got a job, I said, which was technically true. A good one, with benefits. She smiled, tears in her eyes. I'm so proud of you. Guilt and hope warred in my chest. I hadn't lied, not exactly, but I hadn't told her the whole truth either. By evening, I found myself in a car being driven to an address in the most exclusive part of the city. When we pulled through iron gates and up a long drive, my breath caught. The mansion rose before me like something from a movie. Stone and glass and elegant architecture, it sat on acres of perfectly manicured grounds. Lights glowed warmly from the windows. The front door opened, and Candace appeared. Behind her, I could see a small figure, a child, peeking around her legs. Jade, Candace said. And did she look almost nervous? Welcome home. Home. The word felt strange and too big and somehow just a little bit right. I walked up the steps, knowing that with each footstep, I was walking into a new life. A life built on a contract and necessity, yes. But as I met Candace's eyes and saw the small, grateful smile on her lips, I wondered if maybe it could become something more, something real. The little boy staring at me from behind Candace's legs had the biggest brown eyes I'd ever seen. Dark curls framed his small face, and he clutched a worn, stuffed rabbit to his chest like a shield. Matthew, Candace said gently, her entire demeanor softening as she looked down at him. This is Jade. Remember I told you someone special would be staying with us? He nodded but didn't move, those enormous eyes studying me with a child's perfect honesty. I knelt down slowly, making myself smaller, less intimidating. Hi, Matthew. That's a very nice rabbit you have. Does he have a name? Matthew looked at his stuffed animal, then back at me. Mr. Hoppy, he whispered. Mr. Hoppy is a perfect name, I said seriously. I had a stuffed bear when I was your age. His name was Captain Buttons because he had button eyes and I thought he could protect me from bad dreams. Something flickered in Matthew's expression, curiosity breaking through shyness. Did he? Every single time, I promised. I bet Mr. Hoppy is just as brave. The smallest smile touched his lips, and I felt something warm bloom in my chest. This child had lost everything, his parents, his home, his entire world. And somehow, I was supposed to help give him a new one. Would you like to show Jade around? Candace asked him, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. Matthew nodded and stepped forward, his small hand reaching out to take mine. His fingers were tiny and warm, and the trust in that simple gesture made my throat tight. As Matthew led me through the mansion, I tried not to gape at the sheer luxury. Marble floors, high ceilings with crystal chandeliers, artwork that belonged in museums. Everything was beautiful and expensive and somehow still managed to feel cold, except when Matthew laughed. He showed me his playroom, filled with toys that looked barely touched. He showed me the enormous kitchen. He showed me the garden through tall windows, lit up with soft lights as evening fell. And this, Candace said, stopping at a door on the second floor, is your room. She opened the door, and I stepped into a space larger than the entire apartment I'd shared with my mother. A massive bed with soft white linens, a sitting area with plush chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A bathroom that looked like something from a spa. It's too much, I whispered. It's yours, Candace said simply. Matthew's room is just next door. and mine is at the end of the hall. Aunt Candace. Matthew tugged on her sleeve. Can Jade read me a story before bed? Candace looked at me, a question in her eyes. Was I ready for this? I smiled at Matthew. I would love to. An hour later, I sat on the edge of Matthew's bed, reading from a picture book about a brave little mouse. Matthew was curled up beside me, Mr. Hoppy tucked under his arm, his eyes growing heavy. Jade? He murmured sleepily. Yes, sweetheart? Are you going to stay forever? My heart clenched. How did you answer that question when you'd signed a contract that said 1 year, but a child needed forever? I'm going to stay as long as you need me, I said softly, smoothing his dark curls back. Is that okay? He nodded, his eyes drifting closed. I like you. You're nice. I like you too, I whispered. By the time I finished the story, he was asleep, breathing softly. I sat there for a moment, just watching him. This innocent child who'd been through so much deserved better than a fake family built on contracts. He deserved real love. When I finally stood and turned toward the door, I gasped. Candace was standing there, leaning against the doorframe, watching us. She'd changed out of her suit into a simple sweater and dark pants, her hair loose around her shoulders. How long have you been there? I whispered. Long enough. She straightened, her eyes on Matthew's sleeping form. He hasn't let anyone read to him since. She trailed off. But I understood. Since his parents died. We stepped out into the hallway, pulling the door almost closed behind us. You're good with him, Candace said quietly. Natural. He's easy to love, I replied, and meant it. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and something passed between us, understanding, maybe, or the beginning of something neither of us was ready to name. You must be exhausted, she said finally. Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll go over schedules, routines, what Matthew needs, and, she hesitated, we'll talk about the wedding. The wedding! Right. Because we were getting married. In less than 2 weeks, according to the lawyers. Candace, I said, and she paused, turning back. Thank you. For my mother. For trusting me with Matthew. Thank you, she said softly. For saying yes when you had every reason to say no. She walked away then, leaving me standing in the hallway of a house that was supposed to be my home now. The next 2 weeks were a blur of schedules, routines, and structure. Candace worked long hours, leaving early and often coming home after Matthew was asleep. But even in her absence, her presence filled the house. Notes left on the kitchen counter, fresh flowers appearing in my room. The way Matthew talked about Aunt Candace with such obvious adoration. I fell into a routine with Matthew. Breakfast together, playing in the garden, reading stories, teaching him to draw. He was bright and curious and slowly coming out of his shell. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at nothing, his little face sad, and I'd know he was thinking about his parents. Those moments broke my heart. But there were good moments, too. His laughter when I made silly faces. His excitement when he showed Candace a picture he'd drawn. The way he started to trust me more each day. And then there were the moments with Candace. She'd come home late, exhausted, and find me in the kitchen making tea. We'd sit together in comfortable silence, the city lights twinkling through the windows. Sometimes she'd ask about my day with Matthew, and her eyes would soften as I told her about his antics. Sometimes she'd tell me about her work, the stress, the pressure, and I'd listen. We were becoming something. Not quite friends, not quite strangers anymore. Something in between. The wedding was small and private, held in a judge's office with only a handful of witnesses. Candace's lawyer, my mother, and Matthew, who held the rings without really understanding what was happening. I wore a simple cream dress. Candace wore a tailored suit in soft gray that made her eyes look like silver. When we stood before the judge and repeated our vows, my hands trembled in hers. I, Candace Garfield, take you, Jade Campbell. Her voice was steady, professional, but her thumbs traced small circles on the backs of my hands. I, Jade Campbell, take you, Candace Garfield. The words felt heavier than they should, more real. When the judge told Candace she could kiss her bride, we both hesitated. It was supposed to be for show, a simple, brief kiss to make it official. But when Candace leaned down and pressed her lips to mine, soft and gentle and careful, something electric shot through me. The kiss lasted only seconds, but when she pulled back, her eyes were dark and uncertain, and I knew she'd felt it too. That moment when pretend started to feel dangerously real. 2 months passed. Life as Candace Garfield's wife was strange and surreal. We attended charity galas, where people stared at us with curiosity and judgment. The CEO and her sudden wife. I heard someone whisper once, "How convenient," right before a custody hearing. Candace's hand had tightened on my waist, her jaw clenching. But she'd smiled through it, playing the role perfectly, and I'd learned to do the same. At home, things were easier. Matthew had fully accepted me now, running to me when he woke up, holding my hand during meals, asking me to tuck him in every night. Watching him heal, bit by bit, made everything worth it. And Candace was becoming harder to read. Sometimes I'd catch her watching me with an expression I couldn't decipher. Sometimes our hands would brush and she'd pull away quickly, like I'd burned her. Sometimes she'd smile at something I said, a real smile that made her whole face light up, and my heart would skip a beat. We were living together, raising a child together, legally married, but we barely touched. Separate bedrooms, separate lives that only intersected when necessary. It should have been fine. It was what we'd agreed to. So why did it feel like slow torture? One afternoon, everything shifted. Matthew wanted to go to the park, a normal, innocent desire. I'd said yes without thinking. But when Candace came home and found out, her reaction shocked me. "The park?" Her voice was sharp, edged with something like panic. "Jade, we have photographers watching this house constantly. Do you know what kind of speculation could start? He's a 4-year-old child who wants to play," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "We can't keep him locked up here forever." "I'm not locking him up." Her jaw was tight. "I'm protecting him. I'm protecting all of us. Everything we do is under scrutiny. One wrong move and the judge could decide I'm unfit. So we just hide. We just pretend to be a perfect family behind closed doors but never actually live? You don't understand the pressure I'm under." Her voice rose, and I saw real fear in her eyes now. "Everything I've built could all disappear if I make one mistake. Matthew could be taken away from me. Do you understand that?" The raw emotion in her voice stopped me cold. This wasn't about control or image. This was about terror. The fear of losing the last family she had left. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "I wasn't thinking about the custody hearing." Candace closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. When she opened them again, the vulnerability was hidden behind walls. "Take him to the park. But please, let Thomas drive you. Use the car with tinted windows. Be careful." "Candace." "I need to work," she said, already turning away. But I saw the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands shook slightly. She was carrying so much weight, and she was doing it alone. That evening, after Matthew was asleep, I found Candace in her study, surrounded by papers, her head in her hands. "Candace?" I knocked softly. She looked up, and for just a second, before she could hide it, I saw exhaustion and loneliness in her eyes. "Matthew had a wonderful time," I said, stepping inside. "Thank you for letting us go." She nodded. "I'm glad." I hesitated, then crossed the room. "You know, you don't have to carry everything alone. That's why I'm here, remember? We're supposed to be partners in this." "Partners," she repeated, and something flickered across her face. "Right." The way she said it made my chest tight, like the word meant something different to her than it was supposed to. I reached out, my hand covering hers on the desk. "Talk to me, please." She stared at our hands, and I watched her throat work as she swallowed. "Do you ever—" she started, then stopped. "Do you ever forget this is supposed to be fake?" The question hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning. My heart started pounding. "What do you mean?" She finally looked up at me, and the raw honesty in her eyes stole my breath. I mean, sometimes, when you're reading to Matthew, or when you smile at me over breakfast, or when you take my hand at those galas, sometimes I forget we're pretending. Sometimes it feels real. I finished softly. She nodded, and I saw the fear in her expression. Fear of being vulnerable, of admitting something she shouldn't feel. I forget too, I whispered. The confession hung between us. We were both still, barely breathing, the air thick with everything we weren't saying. Then Candace's phone rang, shattering the moment. She pulled her hand away from mine, answering with her professional voice. Garfield. I could hear a woman's voice on the other end. Candace's expression shifted frustration, then resignation. Fine, she said curtly. Tomorrow at 8. But this is the last time, Evelyn. Evelyn. An old friend from university, she'd mentioned once. A business associate. She hung up and rubbed her temples. I'm sorry. I have a dinner meeting tomorrow night. With Evelyn? The question came out sharper than I intended. Candace's eyebrows rose slightly. Yes. She's been persistent about discussing a potential partnership. It's just business, Jade. Just business. The words shouldn't have bothered me, but they did. Of course, I said, forcing a smile. I should let you work. I left before she could see the jealousy I had no right to feel. The next evening, I tried not to watch the clock, tried not to imagine Candace at some expensive restaurant with this Evelyn woman, tried not to wonder if Evelyn made her smile the way I sometimes did. By 10 o'clock, after putting Matthew to bed, I was restless. I made tea I didn't drink. I stood by the window, watching the city lights, wondering when caring about Candace had stopped being part of the contract and started being real. When I finally heard the front door open around 10:30, my heart leaped. I stayed in the kitchen, pretending to be casually making tea, as if I hadn't been counting the minutes. Candace appeared in the doorway, still in her work clothes, looking tired but composed. You're up late, she said. Couldn't sleep. I poured hot water over a tea bag. How was dinner? Long. She leaned against the counter. Evelyn wants to merge parts of our companies. She's been pushing for weeks. And I told her no. Again. Candace sighed. She doesn't take no well. I handed her a cup of tea, and our fingers brushed. That electric feeling again. Thank you, she said softly. We stood there in the quiet kitchen, sipping tea, the space between us feeling charged with unspoken things. Jade, Candace said finally. About what I said earlier. About forgetting this is fake. Don't, I interrupted, setting down my cup. Don't take it back. Don't pretend you didn't mean it. She looked at me, surprise flickering in her eyes. Because I meant what I said too, I continued, my heart racing. And I'm tired of pretending I don't feel I couldn't finish. Couldn't say the words that would change everything. Feel what? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. She'd set down her own cup and was moving closer. I don't know, I admitted. I don't know what this is, but it's not nothing, and it's not just for show. Not anymore. We were standing so close now. I could smell her perfume, faint and expensive. Could see the way her chest rose and fell with quick breaths. This is complicated, she whispered. I know. We have a contract, an agreement. I know that too. If we cross this line. She trailed off, but her hand came up to cup my cheek, her thumb brushing my skin with devastating gentleness. I don't know if I could go back. Then don't, I breathed. For a long moment, we just stood there, balanced on the edge of something that would change everything. Her eyes searched mine, asking a question. I answered by rising on my toes and closing the distance between us. The kiss was nothing like our wedding kiss, that brief, careful press of lips. This was real. This was months of tension and longing and pretending finally breaking free. Her lips were soft and warm. One of her hands tangled in my hair while the other pulled me closer by my waist. I gripped the front of her shirt, holding on like she was the only solid thing in a spinning world. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, She rested her forehead against mine. "Jade," she whispered, and my name in her voice sounded like a prayer. "What are we doing?" "I don't know," I admitted, "but I don't want to stop." She pulled back just enough to look at me, her eyes dark and full of emotions I was afraid to name. "The custody hearing is in 2 weeks. If we do this, if we make this real, we have to be sure. Because Matthew needs stability. I'm not going anywhere," I said firmly. "Contract or no contract, I care about Matthew. And I took a breath. I care about you." Something in her expression cracked open, vulnerability flooding through. "I care about you too. So much, it terrifies me." "Then be terrified with me," I whispered. She laughed softly, and the sound was beautiful and broken and real. Then she kissed me again, slower this time, sweeter, like she was savoring it. We didn't take it further that night. We just stood in the kitchen, holding each other, letting the truth settle between us. The contract was still real. The complications were still there. But so was this feeling that had grown in the space between pretend and real. When we finally said goodnight and went to our separate rooms, I lay in bed with my fingers pressed to my lips, smiling into the darkness. Everything had changed. The following week felt different. Lighter, somehow, despite the complications. Candace smiled, more real smiles that reached her eyes. She'd brush past me in the hallway, and her hand would linger on my waist just a second longer than necessary. At breakfast, she'd catch my eye over Matthew's head, and something would pass between us, a secret, a promise. Matthew noticed too, in the way children do. "You and Aunt Candace are happy," he said one afternoon as we colored together. "We are," I agreed, and it was the truth. "Good," he said seriously. "I like it when people are happy." This sweet child had known so much sadness. If Candace and I could give him happiness, even just a little, then everything was worth it. But peace never lasted long. One morning, a week before the custody hearing, I was making lunch when my phone exploded with notifications. Text messages, social media alerts, even a call from my mother. With shaking hands, I opened a news website. The headline made my blood run cold. "Garfield marriage exposed. Contract leaked. CEO accused of fraud. No, 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 no." I scrolled through the article, my heart sinking with every word. Someone had leaked details of our contract. The article laid it all out. The 1-year agreement, the financial arrangements, even quotes from the contract itself. My phone rang. "Candace, I'm coming home," she said, her voice tight with barely controlled fury. "Don't answer the door. Don't talk to anyone. I'll handle this. Candace, just stay there. Please, keep Matthew inside." She hung up before I could respond. Matthew came running into the kitchen. "Jade, there are people outside with cameras." I forced a smile. "It's okay, sweetheart. Why don't we go play in your room?" But even as I led him upstairs, my mind was racing. Who had leaked the contract? Why now? Right before the custody hearing. And what would this do to Matthew? To Candace? To us? Candace arrived home 40 minutes later. When she came through the door, her expression was a storm. "Where's Matthew?" she asked. "Napping." I gave him lunch and read him 3 stories. He finally fell asleep. She nodded, then sagged against the wall, the composed CEO mask cracking. "This is a disaster." I went to her, taking her cold hands in mine. "We'll fix it." She laughed, but it was bitter. "How? The whole world now knows our marriage was a contract. The judge will see this. I'm going to lose him, Jade. I'm going to lose Matthew." "No," I said firmly, gripping her hands tighter. "No, you're not. We're not going to let that happen." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I know you. I know how much you love Matthew. And I know that what started as a contract became real somewhere along the way. The judge won't care about that. Then we make them care." An idea was forming, wild and terrifying. "We tell the truth. All of it." Candace stared at me. "What?" "We hold a press conference. We admit, yes, it started as a contract. But we also tell them what happened after. How we became a family. How we— I took a breath. How we fell in love. The words hung between us. We'd admitted caring about each other, but love that was bigger, scarier. Jade, Candace whispered. I love you, I said. And saying it out loud felt like jumping off a cliff. I don't know when it happened, but it's real, Candace. What we have is real. And if we stand in front of those cameras and tell them that honestly, openly, maybe they'll see it too. Tears spilled down her cheeks. You love me? Yes, I said simply. I love you. I love Matthew. I love this family we've built. And I'm willing to stand in front of the whole world and say it. She pulled me into her arms, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe. I love you too, she whispered against my hair. God, Jade, I love you so much. We stood there, holding each other, while outside the reporters waited. Okay, Candace said finally. We do the press conference. Together. We tell them everything. She kissed me then, and it tasted like salt from tears and something sweeter hope. The press conference was scheduled for the next afternoon. Candace's PR team worked through the night, though Candace insisted we wouldn't use a script. This had to be real, honest, from the heart. When the time came, we sat behind a table in a hotel ballroom, cameras and reporters packed in so tightly I could barely breathe. Candace and I held hands on top of the table where everyone could see. The room was loud with questions until Candace leaned forward to the microphone. Thank you all for coming, she said, her voice steady and clear. Yes, my marriage to Jade began as a legal arrangement. I needed to demonstrate a stable home for my nephew. Jade needed financial help for her mother. We entered into a contract. The room erupted in murmurs. But here's what the leaked documents don't show, Candace continued, her voice softening. They don't show the first time Matthew smiled at Jade. They don't show how she turned our house into a home. She turned to look at me, and the love in her eyes was so clear. They don't show the moment I realized I'd fallen in love with her, Candace said. The room exploded with camera flashes and shouted questions, but Candace just kept looking at me. My turn, I said, leaning toward my microphone. The room quieted. When I agreed to this arrangement, I was desperate. My mother was dying. I had no hope. Candace offered me a way out, and I took it. I took a breath. But you can't live with someone, care for a child together, build a life together, and not feel something. I watched Candace put Matthew first in everything. I saw the woman behind the CEO, and I fell in love with her. Candace's eyes were shimmering with tears. So yes, I continued. Our marriage started as a contract, but it's not fake. What we have is real. Matthew is our son. This is our family, and I choose them. Every day, I choose them. The room exploded again, but I barely heard it. Candace was kissing me, right there in front of everyone. When we finally pulled apart, she whispered, I love you. I love you too, I whispered back. 3 days later, we sat in the courtroom for the custody hearing. The judge reviewed everything, the contract, the press conference, letters about Matthew's progress, testimony about our family. The opposing lawyer painted us as frauds, as manipulators. I watched Candace's jaw tighten with each accusation, her hand gripping mine. Finally, it was our turn to speak. Candace stood and addressed the judge. Your Honor, I won't pretend our marriage began conventionally, but Matthew has thrived in our care. He's happy, healthy, loved. If you take him from us now, you'll be taking away the only stability he's found since losing his parents. Then the judge looked at me. Mrs. Garfield, would you like to add anything? I stood, my legs shaking. Your Honor, you can't pay someone to love a child. You can't contract someone to care when he has nightmares, or to celebrate when he learns something new. I love that little boy like he's mine. And I love Candace. We're not a traditional family, but we're a real family. And Matthew deserves to stay with people who love him that much. The judge was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he looked up. What matters is the well-being of the child, he said. The evidence shows that Matthew has flourished under your care. Yes, this marriage began unconventionally, but I see no evidence that the home is unstable. Hope surged in my chest. Therefore, I'm granting full custody to Candace Garfield. With Jade Garfield recognized as legal co-parent, the gavel came down. We'd won. Candace made a sound half sob, half laugh, and pulled me into her arms. We held each other, crying and laughing and shaking with relief. When we were allowed to see Matthew, he ran to us, and we both knelt down to catch him. "Are we going home?" he asked. "Yes, baby," Candace said, kissing his forehead. "We're all going home. Together." "Forever?" he asked. "Forever," I promised. 6 months later, life had settled into something beautifully ordinary. Matthew started kindergarten. My mother had finished her treatment and was healthy. Candace had cut back her hours to be more present. And us? We were learning how to be married for real. One evening, after putting Matthew to bed, Candace found me on the balcony overlooking the garden. "Hey," she said softly, wrapping her arms around me from behind. I leaned back into her embrace. "Hey yourself." "I was thinking about how different my life was a year ago," she murmured. "I was alone, convinced I could never be a good parent. And now?" I asked. "Now I have you. I have Matthew. I have everything I never knew I needed." I turned to face her. "I never knew I could be this happy." She kissed me, slow and sweet and full of promise. When we pulled apart, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small box. My heart skipped. "Candace, I know we're already married," she said, opening the box to reveal a beautiful ring. "But that was for legal reasons. This is because I choose you. Every day, for the rest of my life. Will you wear this?" Tears blurred my vision as I held out my hand. She slipped the ring on, and it fit perfectly. "I choose you too," I whispered. "Every single day." We stood there under the stars, and I thought about how a desperate phone call and an impossible offer had led to this moment. How a contract had become a love story. "Mommy Jade! Mommy Candace!" We turned to see Matthew in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. "Bad dream, sweetheart?" I asked. He nodded, and Candace scooped him up. "Want to sleep with us tonight?" He nodded again, and we carried him to our bedroom, the one we'd been sharing for months now. We settled into bed, Matthew between us, safe and loved. Within minutes, he was asleep again. Candace reached across him to take my hand, our rings catching the light. "This is everything," she whispered. I looked at her, this powerful, beautiful woman who'd become my entire world. I looked at Matthew, learning to love again. I thought about the journey that had brought us together. "Yes," I whispered back. "This is everything." And as I drifted off to sleep, surrounded by the people I loved most, I realized something profound. Sometimes the best love stories don't start with love at all. Sometimes they start with desperation and contracts and impossible arrangements. Sometimes they start with two people who need each other for all the wrong reasons and discover they want each other for all the right ones. Sometimes paper hearts become real. And when they do, they beat stronger than anything else in the world. If this story touched your heart, please show some love by hitting that like button. It helps us share more beautiful love stories like Jade and Candace's journey. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss our next emotional romance. We have so many more stories about love that defies expectations, breaks boundaries, and proves that sometimes the most unexpected connections become the most beautiful ones. Drop a comment below and tell us, would you have signed the contract? Have you ever taken a leap of faith for love? We read every comment and love hearing your thoughts. Share this story with someone who believes in second chances, unexpected love, or anyone who needs a reminder that family isn't always about blood, it's about the people who choose to stay. Thank you for being part of our community. Thank you for supporting love in all its forms. Until next time, keep loving beyond the rules.